Welcome. So glad to have you here with us. Today, we're going to be talking about traits of an old soul. This is part two. So if you listened to part one, we're going to be continuing. If you haven't heard part one, you might want to go back and listen to that and then tune back into this part two. Before we get started today, I heard the news just like an hour ago, and so sad. We want to send our condolences to the United Kingdom on the death of your beloved Queen Elizabeth II. I know she dedicated her whole life. She was the glue. She held everything together, and I know how hard this is. I'm feeling your pain as an empath, so our hearts are breaking with yours. So I hope that everything goes well in the transition and that you can find peace in her passing. Sedona, you weren't here with us before when we talked about traits of an old soul. And so I thought we'd give you an opportunity before we get into part two. Let's let you talk about what you think an old soul is. What do you see in an old soul?
Okay, thanks. I did listen to a little bit of part one to get a little refresher. But for me, a lot of people said I'm an old soul. And I guess I could start at the beginning of my close to infancy childhood when I supposedly, don't remember this, but about the age of 2 or 3, was asking asking my mom, who's God and why am I here? So she was completely perplexed at this youngster asking these kinds of questions, but it was like I was taking off from another part of my time being here in the world. And so I think these old souls come through like, really young. They still remember a lot of stuff because you're talking about being born, so many times in this planet, in this earth system. So that's a real detector, I think, of an old soul as a young child, being able to ask questions, but also answer things, know things. And one thing that just came to mind, I don't know if you talked about the movie Kundun. Did you
I
talk
don't think
about that?
so. No.
So the movie Kundun is about the discovering of the Buddha. And in the movie, it's very interesting because they have certain instruments that were personally his. And then they asked this child to see if it could recognize. So that's how they find the next kind of Buddha master. But it's like recognition of things from the past, but also in my case, I find you can do almost anything in this lifetime. Like you have so many skills, just immense amount of skills that you can use. So that's how I kind of consider an old soul, saying wise things at very, very young ages. I have another family that I've worked with, and their children, they have a 3-year-old boy, and the parents really honor their children. And when the boy speaks, the parents listen, because they say that everything that seems to come out of his mouth is so wise. So that is also, I think, a consideration for these old souls. But I do believe, like you said, that everyone has lived many, many lifetimes, and it's about tapping into some of your memories. And you can do that through soul regression, past life sessions, and stuff like that. If you want to know more, and really opening up your third eye, I think really helps you tap into the old traits that you have, and really are here to help you in this lifetime at this point. That's why we carry these traits with us.
One thing I forgot to say in part one that later I was thinking, oh, I wish I'd added this. So I noticed that with people I consider to be old souls, I think it can be boiled down to they have an attitude of this too shall pass. It's like they just don't get riled up about things the way most people do. They stay very calm. It's like they've seen this before so many times, or situations similar, and they know things are going to be okay on the other side. And they just don't get involved in all the human drama as much. They stay more calm, more focused and balanced. And I think that can only be achieved through many, many lifetimes and some memory. You have to be able to be retaining some of your memories from those lifetimes to achieve that. Especially these days, it's not easy to get that balance. Roz is grinning. So another thing is feeling connected to the past. You know, it can be looking to your past, the lives of others to learn about the world, and just feeling a special connection with those who are older than you. So respecting and enjoying being around elderly people, cherishing the information that they have, the wisdom, the experiences, the skills, and that's the same as cherishing what you've gathered over your lifetimes. I think history fascinates an old soul. And I thought about that, and I'm starting to wonder, like, I've been involved in this Renaissance recreation group since '89, and everybody in it is passionate about medieval and Renaissance history and sometimes other similar nearby time eras, but all of us are so passionate about it. And I read this when I was researching about old souls, and I'm like, oh, you know, I guess it's kind of not the mainstream to be so into medieval times or Renaissance times that you make a whole wardrobe and you learn all these arts and sciences from the time. So look at the Civil War reenactors. Let's look at the people who go back. There's ones who are really into like Celtic heritage and all kinds of things that involve history, and just historians in general. Historians might be old souls where life was more simple. You know, I think we have a lot of memories. It's only in recent times that life became so complicated. The more tech we have, the more complicated it seems to get. Have you noticed that? Yikes. And people want to kind of get back to that simple life. And I think an old soul remembers the simple times. Growing up in an area, seeing the same people, kind of growing your own food, eating what's seasonal. You know, it was just a whole lot more simpler in general.
I agree with you, Ivory, that simplicity of life, a lot of people I meet are continually saying, I just want to go back to like living on the land.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of remembrance of that time in that simplicity. It doesn't mean that that time was easy necessarily either, but it was different. And more people I keep meeting keep saying, I just want to go back to that time of living in that simplicity of life, in that communal life as well. I
Oh
hear
my
that.
gosh. This just came up twice last week with clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
About
And
going
personal
back to,
friends. Oh yeah.
yeah.
Talking about, they're not sure they want to live in a commune, but talking about putting together like a place that basically would be a commune, because it's a group of people living together and sharing tasks, you know, so that's a commune. But they want to do something like that with friends of theirs, and asked me if I would be interested. And you know, I've had these offers since the '80s to do things. It just has never been the right group of people or the right location. And it's interesting now. Would you do that, Sedona, if that was offered to you and the right people, the right place?
It has to be the right people in the right place, because I have lived in an ashram setting before. And I have to say, and it was during the time of the pandemic when I lived in that, and it really felt like we weren't affected by the external world. So there is something to be said about creating a community of harmony, where people work together. I'm always into let's have utopia, but this planet doesn't seem to agree with my philosophy. But it doesn't stop me from always wanting that. So even in my experience of living in community, after a while, I start to see the politics and stuff like that. That's kind of like our human nature. But I think old souls are going to be the ones that are going to shift us back to a little bit of that simplicity. I think when you're headed on like a crash course, which I think in a way a little bit of the technology is, it's just hyping people up so much that eventually it's going to be challenging to keep up with it. Now I notice in New coming in are better, with technology. But I think in a way, the old souls will help us bring us back to a certain amount of simplicity. And it's not putting it out on the old souls. It's us, it's me right here today that has to start bringing that into my life. And so that's something that we can all do, is really look at what part of my old soul is coming through right now. So really tune in to what part of you is wanting to be bringing forth this new way of life, and this talk of the consciousness raising and stuff like that. So I really feel that it's an individual thing, and then you find, as we are magnetic energies, you tend to find people like-minded. So just attracting like-minded people, and then coming together, bringing that community of people, whether it's just 2 or 3 to start with an idea of how you want to shift things. That's when things will really start to change. I did just meet a woman recently who lives in New Hampshire, and she wants to buy land, and she wants to start building cob homes, from the earth and stuff like that. So there's going to be more and more of these things arising, I feel, as people get tired of the rick-rock of this life and the go, go, go,
Yeah.
and come back to. But when I was a child, I guess I was in my teenagers, there was a historic village where the women were dressed in historic clothes, and they were making bread from scratch, no bread makers or anything. And I remember, and it was a fort, so it was built as a fort, as a protective fort. And I was maybe 12 years old, and I wanted to leave my family and go live there. Like, this was just an enactment place. It was a museum, but I felt so comfortable in this place. So there's several times where I've felt that over my life, where I just wanted to go back in time and
Oh,
live that.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Well, think about it too. Like you're saying, you think like the old souls will be the ones who take us to a simpler life. It takes an old soul to be a calm center in a storm, to stay balanced when things are chaotic. And I think that those are the kind of people who are going to be able to usher in a new way of being amongst each other personally and on a bigger scale.
Yeah. I think that when I did live in community, what I learned was a lot about it's called seva, selfless service, where you just serve, and your ego really has to take a back seat. And I feel like old souls know that. You've lived so many lifetimes with so many people and so many battles. It's like, do I really want to keep battling anymore? So the ego just kind of sits back, and you just serve. And it's a knowing that in serving, you'll be taken care of. That's kind of the part that goes together, because I feel like in this world we are so in a way individually driven to survive, like, pay our bills and find any kind of job. But I did meet a woman quite a few years ago, and she had a prediction, and I do believe that this is coming, that I don't know how long it's going to take, but that the basic needs will be met on the planet. So people will have food, they'll have home, they'll have shelter, they'll have clothing. And in that Maslow's, I think that's the word, pyramid, the basic needs need to really be covered first before you can even, the highest is just sitting, meditating, and spirituality. So basic needs are met, and then what will happen on the planet is people will all be able to be creative more so. And when you're in creative mode, there isn't battling. We're only battling because we're trying to survive. And our planet, and the dinosaurs tried to survive and they didn't make it. If we could just move ourselves out of survival mode and come up to a creative mode, then you get to spiritual mode. So these are kind of the steps. And I have some struggles right now myself, even in those basic levels. But what I can do is I can move myself into creative. And if you can just shift like one step up, even if you can't maintain that and you have to come back to survival and all these different things, the more you can keep stepping up out of that basic level to one level higher or the second level higher, and just spend a few minutes there, even, it will really help people that are struggling right now. Because I know there's a lot of struggles in this world at this time. So,
Yes, there are. I
yeah.
want to go to some other points here about traits of an old soul would be that you do spend time reflecting on your life. And like you say, you have to have your basic needs met before you've got the mental space to do something like that. Roz and I are always talking about the need for self-examination, for reflection, for introspection. If you don't do that, how do you know where you need to work? How do you know what you need to improve? How do you know where you even are personally and spiritually? So if you like to learn about yourself and you're open to seeing your faults and you want to work on that, you're willing to work on it, you can improve yourself from the inside out, you're very likely an old soul. And
Mhm.
luckily we see a lot of people like that, don't we?
I would say you're seeing more and more every day because the spirituality is on the rise for people. And a recent client came in and he had COVID and thought he was going to not make it. And this was the second time in his life. He's a young man in his 30s, who's had some serious illness. And when that happened, it really made him think, why am I here? What is my purpose? And I think because we went through a world pandemic, more people are wanting to know what their purpose is.
I
And
totally see it as a real spiritual boost. It has made a lot of people. I've seen people personally and professionally. Same thing, Sedona. They had got really ill with COVID, and it didn't. It's not that it scared them. It woke them up somehow. It woke them up like they were in some sort of a rut.
yeah, it's
So
definitely, to me, what I saw, it was just a here to come on our planet to really shift our consciousness and wake people up. Exactly, Ivory. It's really, that's what it was about. And that's why so many people are tuning into shows like this and wanting to know more and wanting to know what their intuition is. And that's part of an old soul, is having a strong intuition and being able to listen to that, but also because you've had so many experiences living this lifetime, you have courage to act on it. And that those are keys. If you listen but you don't do anything, you're just sitting there. So taking that extra step, and those old souls could definitely do it. A lot of courage, a lot of wisdom.
absolutely. And I think another one too that's kind of along the same line, another trait is that you know how to, instead of looking to others to make things better for you, you're willing to take responsibility for your choices, your actions, your mistakes. And when you do that, like that's a position of power. And so I do see old souls as being quietly powerful.
Mm.
You know, they're not loud, they're not usually, you know, the ones who are out there trying to be the center of attention, but yet people listen to them. You know, there's just something about them, that strength that they carry. They're humble enough to acknowledge that life is random and surprising, but are comforted by the fact they can always choose how to react to whatever happens to them. So I guess it's sort of like you're a little boat on the ocean and there's swells, but you know you're going to go down where you're going to go up again, and comes back to that, just knowing things are going to get better. You're going to get through it. It's up to you to make it through this life in one piece. And old souls have that. They don't. Here's another thing. I think they really don't go to other people for their insights too much. Not very often at all. They're very self-sufficient because they do have a lot of wisdom that they're carrying into this lifetime. And I'm sure they don't remember everything from every lifetime. I think our heads would explode with that much knowledge. Can't even imagine that. But it is important that they have that wisdom most people don't have.
Mhm.
They tend to look at the bigger picture in life. And I think that's, instead of like focusing on the little nitty gritty things that aren't quite right for them, that aren't perfect in their life, they're looking at a bigger picture. They always want to know the how, and they know the why of what they're doing. I mean, most of us, like you said, Sedona, we get caught up in our own lives, and people can become delusioned and short-sighted by what's right in front of them at the moment, but the old soul will not, because they know that whatever problems they have, there are always bigger ones out there. And so they're like, this could be worse. And they can look out there and see, like, if they're having a physical issue, they can look out and see, well, it's that kind of thing. Like, I may be missing a foot, but there's a man who's missing a leg. Do you know what I mean? Like, even when bad things happen, you can keep it in perspective. Here's one that I found interesting, that an old soul, a typical trait is they don't have a lot of friends as a kid. That might be an
Why do
old
you think
soul.
that is?
I had one as a like grade school. I had one friend. No, maybe two, maybe two. And you might have felt like you were the odd one out in school, and it could be you were more mature than the rest of the kids. You really didn't relate to them. So you probably got along with adults, older people better than you did other children. My daughter is this person. When she was 5 and 6 years old, she would tell me, no, I don't want to go to their house. I want to go with you. And I'm like, you're going to be the only kid. Yeah, that's why I want to go. And she would have these conversations. She was friends with everybody in the theater group, all my social group. And she's still kind of like that. You might like different music than people your age. You might not be into the same kind of books or activities. Maybe you just can't relate. Maybe you didn't see the point of drinking just because other people are drinking, or doing drugs because other people are doing drugs. Or you had to pretend to like certain things in order to feel like you fit in. Now that you're older, you don't have to pretend anymore. You really accept yourself as being unique and different. Plus, once you're out of school, things are just easier, aren't they? For those of you listening who are in school, I'm so sorry. Things get better. This is not the apex of your life. This is the training ground. Things just really start to take off when you get out of high school. What do you think about just feeling mature? That an old soul will feel mature?
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what you said about the school, not one friend, not really fitting in. But when you said that, my question was, I wonder why. Um, why, and was there anything about why an old soul would have just one friend, not feel like
No,
they
but
fit in?
don't you wonder, like, if you don't really resonate with other children, you might be more like friends with an elderly neighbor next door, or a babysitter, or a friends of your parents, and just feel like you can have better conversations with them. You might find other children to be a little boring. I will say for myself, I think a reason was that I was always an observer, still am. So I was in grade school, and I remember watching people and situations, and I could figure it out, and things were confusing to me and mystifying at times. And I didn't really understand why some people were acting the way they were and why people would respond to it the way they did. But I found myself just sort of studying them dispassionately, just watching. And that that kind of probably put me outside of things. I don't know, when you're a psychic medium and nobody else that is, that alone will do it. So, that's also a trait of a psychic medium as a child, when you have all these things happening and nobody to talk to about it. So there's a lot of things that can do this. So it's not like having one of these traits means you're an old soul, but you can be an old soul and a psychic empath. You can be an old soul and be a medium. You're not just one thing. But I do think that it's always like you feel older, or like people would say about my daughter, that girl's 4 going on 40. People like that, right? Roz, I think you have kids like that. I
I
think
do.
you were one of those kids.
I was one of those kids, and there are a couple of my kids definitely like that. So
Yeah, and people notice that, and they're just like, wow, kids don't normally think of things like that, and they don't normally talk about things, and they don't talk so intelligently, so you're probably noticing these things. And if you didn't know that about the traits of an old soul, you just think, wow, that's a really precocious child. Yes.
yeah,
but they're probably just retaining. You said something recently, Roz, about what did you call it? These children who are coming out, they're not indigo, they're not crystal, they're not rainbow. Was it colored children?
Well, there's rainbow sort of
Rainbows. Okay.
fits in there.
I think those
But
rainbow children are old souls.
I've heard people use the terminology in the last maybe 6 months or so. After I was hearing rainbow for a long time, I was hearing multicolor, people saying multicolor, and I think that describes it better than a rainbow in a way, because a rainbow stays in the lines
True.
of,
True.
and these kids that are so incredibly intuitively and psychically gifted, I mean, they're just all over, their abilities are all over the chart.
You know what, Roz? We should probably do a show about the multicolored children, because we've never really done one that focuses on that generation of these really spiritually advanced children. So
I've only heard that a couple of times, but when I heard it, I thought, yeah, that really
I'm meeting them.
describes.
I'm just meeting those children, and they feel different than the previous generations of these type of children.
Well, I've always felt like the indigo children and the crystal children, which I feel like that's my category that I sort of was born in and have fallen into. I feel like this is again like the old soul thing. These are gifts, abilities, and frequencies that some people tap into. They expand, as the child gets older. But wow, I mean, what amazing people, what amazing kids. And throughout the generations, we've seen all of these amazing frequency gifts that kids have, and it just goes on.
It does. I want to be sure to get this next one in, because I bet a lot of people will resonate with this one. Old souls, I think this is one of the most telling traits, is that people tend to come to them for advice. Even if they're not in a position, like a formal position as a counselor, therapist, and mentor, people come to them for advice. And a lot of times those old soul people will end up getting into positions where they do that for a living, because people are coming. I was that kid, like from very young age, people were coming to me for advice all the time. And I finally was like, my angels are like, you need to get into the field of mental health. I'm like, I think I'm already in it, but now I'll just be, get paid for it. And that's true. It's just like, I don't know, I just know that they do. A lot of people turn to others, but even if you're not doing something professionally that people would traditionally go to, you're going to find people. Here's one big one. You find total strangers just spilling their guts to you, like telling you all these personal things. You barely know them, but they just trust you so much, and you feel safe to them, and they know that they can tell you. And you're kind of wondering, like, why is everybody telling me these things? Well, maybe this will clarify it for you. Any last thoughts you ladies have on this topic?
I think it's like an ever expanding world.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The more we learn about it, the more we talk about it and experience it and help other people experience it, it just continues. So it's really interesting. I said to someone recently, like, who asked me, well, like, was there a time when you really felt like that was your time? And I was like, yeah, the 70s. People's heads were like busting open in the late 60s and the 70s. And I just felt right at home.
Oh yeah. I real quick, I just want to say that some of the struggles you might have as an old soul would be, again, you feel like you don't fit in with people your age, you're separate from the values and beliefs of those around you. You might feel you have an awareness that the people you relate to don't share. And because you do experience the world differently, it's important to be at ease and confident with your sensitivity. It's something that can help you and help others. It is a gift. So it's important that you know yourself well and are fully connected to who you are, and allow yourself to empower your abilities, because again, being an old soul is a gift. Not everybody gets that knowledge. Did you have one last thing you want to say, Sedona?
Yeah, well, I just was saying with the Kundun movie, it wasn't the Buddha, it was the Dalai Lama. I just have to make that correction.
Okay.
But also, I feel sometimes old souls, they don't want to be here on the planet. And so just to be aware of that, if you're ever feeling that, to maybe check in with getting some help, actually, and seeking someone who could help explain that things to you, because it can be challenging at times.
And
Yeah.
finding support with other old souls. Go ahead,
Yes.
Roz.
Keeping your balance. I
Yeah.
always laugh and go, I'm keeping my balance in an unbalanced world.
Yes, I spend a lot of time doing that. We're so glad that you joined us today. If you have questions or comments, you can always email them to us, and the email address is in the show description. And you can also put it in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to know more about us or our services, please visit us at SedonaSoulSisters.com. Subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss anything, and like us because it always makes us smile. Tune in next Friday. We have a really fun topic. We're going to be talking about sound healing. Sedona here, Sedona Sunn, is a sound healer, and she's really good. Roz and I both have gone to some of her sound healing circles and missed them. They were transcendent. So she'll be able to talk about it, and we'll learn more about that, and she'll give you some examples of it. So in the meantime, have an enlightening week.
Okay.